This is the Module 3 lecture on how TRIP goals overlap and change in conflict. First, it's important to define what we mean by TRIP goals. People in conflict pursue 4 general types of goals: topic or content goals, relational goals, identity goals, and process goals. So we use the acronym TRIP to stand for these 4 major types of goals. Topic goals address the question, what does each person want? Topic goals emerge as different ideas about what to do, what decisions to make, where to go, how to allocate resources, or other externally objectifiable issues. Topic goals can typically be listed, argued, supported with some types of evidence, and broken down into pros and cons. Relational goals address the question, who are we in relationship to each other? Relationship goals define how each party wants to be treated by the other and the total amount of interdependence that they desire. The amount of influence each person has with the other is worked out through our relational interactions. The third goal is the identity or face-saving goals, which address the question, who am I in this interaction? Now, identity conflicts can be hard to identify because they're usually represented as some sort of dispute over a tangible resource. So the key question in addressing identity is, who am I not overall, but in this particular interaction? Or how can I protect my self-identity or perhaps repair it in this particular conflict? So people like to consider themselves to be competent, good friends, reliable family members, likable, logical, experts, trustworthy, or leaders. And in a conflict, we try to address these things through the identity goals that we have. The fourth type of goal is the process goal. And the key question when you're assessing a process goal is, what kind of process should we use in this communication interaction? Many times people disagree how they should go about conducting their conflict. And so it's important for us to address these types of goals as well. Now, when we're considering TRIP goals, we need to understand that not all goals emerge in all disputes. And what that means is I might have a topic goal and a process goal, and it may or may not have very much to do with relationship or identity goals, although more often than not, you'll see many of the TRIP goals in any particular conflict that you might experience. Second, it's important that interests and goals overlap and differ in primacy between the parties that are engaged in conflict. So I may be very, very interested in the topic. You may be much, much more interested in your identity goals. And some of our interests may overlap, and some of our interests may be in direct opposition to one another. Or I may hold one goal to be much more important than you do. Third, it's important to recognize that identity and relational goals tend to be the drivers of our disputes. So again, we might talk about the topic, but we may actually be addressing or attempting to address a conflict with our relationship, or we may be working very hard to protect our own identity in a conflict when all we're doing is talking about that topic. This explains why topic-only solutions are rarely satisfying. If we address a particular topic, but our underlying goal really has to do about the nature of our relationship, then we may find ourselves having a similar conflict over a different topic in the near future. Conflict parties also are known to tend to specialize in one particular kind of goal. And this specialization really comes from particular interests that a person has or particular need that a person has. So if I'm very concerned about identity management, then my identity goals might always be the thing that I'm looking at and focused on. And finally, it's important to recognize that goals may emerge in very different forms. So we may not recognize or see our goals in exactly the same way from one conflict to the next, or even from one person's perception to the next. So as we've been talking about TRIP goals, we've been talking about particular elements that a person or parties in a conflict might be concerned about, particular types of goals we might have. But it's also important to understand that our goals may actually change as we go through a particular interaction with another party. In other words, we have goals that we enter the conflict with, we may have goals that we discover as the conflict goes on, and we may have goals that surface after the conflict is over. And so, in addition to thinking about those 4 types of goals, we also need to think about the timing. So, goals that we identify before a conflict begins are called prospective goals. And the textbook had a reference to fundraising responsibility. These, in this particular example, a person had a goal when they walked in to sit down and talk to somebody. They said, I don't want to be responsible for this. I don't feel comfortable taking care of this. And again, a prospective goal may very much be a goal about a particular topic. It may be a goal about our relationship. It may be a goal about my identity, or it may even be a goal of what sort of process we should be following to address a particular conflict. But as the conflict continues, or as we begin to interact about our conflict, we may find that there are new goals that we discover along the way. So again, the textbook uses an example of difficulty with a financial misunderstanding of a housemate. When is the rent due, and how much are you supposed to pay, and what happens if you don't? This whole goal may sort of shift as the conflict continues, so that your new goal becomes, I really don't feel comfortable living with this person. I can't trust them to pay their rent on time. Maybe I'm worried about being able to trust them with my safety, my security, to trust them to have my best interests at heart. So sometimes when we're in a conflict with another person and we think that we are that other person is actually changing their position, what may actually be happening is that transactive goals may be being revealed as the transaction continues. So often we shift from a topic goal to a process goal, or from a topic goal to a relational goal. So I start out, I want to talk to you about doing the dishes, but somewhere in the middle, I realize that what we're really talking about is if you have enough respect for me to contribute your share towards the household operation, for example. And the final change that goals may undergo often happens after the conflict is over. And these retrospective goals emerge because people have to have a sense of sort of cognitive consonance. So if I've been engaged in a conflict and I've made some decisions, or I have an outcome that I need to live with, it's going to be important for me to be able to justify those decisions and explain to myself and to other people perhaps why I pursued a particular course of action, why I made a particular decision. So these retrospective goals occur after the conflict is over, in part because we may not even know all the implications of a conflict until we look back on it after it's all over. And then sometimes it's easier for us to see, oh, that's what was really going on. Or perhaps it helps us to be able to say, well, I had her best interests at heart, but it's clear that this just isn't working at this time. The final element to consider when we're thinking about conflict goals is that the way in which we go about formulating, changing, and explaining a particular goals in a conflict will have a huge impact on the overall success of the conflict experience. And so it's important for us to take time to really think about our goals, both to identify what type of goal we want to accomplish, and then also to identify the place within the conflict interaction that goal may emerge or change. Then there are 4 advantages to being able to do this. The first is that our solutions may not be satisfied, or may not even be recognized as solutions, if we don't know what we want in the first place. So If I'm concerned that my roommate's not doing the dishes on a regular basis, that sounds like a topic goal. But I've already said that perhaps what I'm really concerned about is our relationship and whether my roommate has respect for me and the things that matter to me. But if I don't know what my real goal is, again, whether I understand that what I'm really worried about is the relationship, then I may think that the topic has been addressed and everything will be fine, but in fact, it may not be. And solutions that I arrive at may, in fact, not even look like solutions to me because they may not be addressing the thing that I think should be taking place in the first place. So it's just really important to be clear what the goals are as you go into a conflict, as you're going through a conflict, and as you're coming out the other side, to be sure that you recognize the solutions that you've arrived at. And secondly, we're only able to share goals that can be clearly explicated. I have to be able to communicate my goals to another person before they're likely to understand what those goals are, and certainly before they're going to be able to comply with them. So, it's really important for us to be able to put those goals into words, to recognize that there may be more than one goal, to recognize that those goals may change, and to be able to communicate clearly as the goals do modify, as we have more than one thing that we're considering, so that the other party has the opportunity to really address and engage with our concerns. Third, clear goals can be changed more easily than vague goals. So if I am interested in doing better in school, that can have lots of meanings. But if I can define what I mean by doing better in school, then it's going to be easier for me to explain to somebody that I'm dating that I don't have time to spend as much time with them as I might have in the past. Because doing better in school could be defined as, putting a minimum amount of time into homework or studying. And if I can get there, and I can define what that is very clearly, and I can talk to my significant other about exactly how that's going to look in terms of our relationship, and if it's going to do good things for my identity as I'm better able to think of myself as a good student, then over time those goals can be actually achieved. But if I have sort of a vague goal, it can be difficult to understand what it really is, and it's certainly going to be difficult to make adjustments to that goal as we go along. And finally, it's important to recognize that clear goals are reached much more often than unclear goals. It's often said that if you don't know where you're going, you're pretty much guaranteed you're going to get there. And there's research that shows that in conflicts in which issues are clearly stated, they tend to be successfully resolved more often than not. Vague and nonspecific issues have a much lower possibility of being resolved, just because we'll actually have a clear sense of what we're working to resolve as we go through that process. And the final thing that's important to recognize is that often when we're engaged in destructive conflict, this is often because we are reacting to another person's behavior. So we're making our choices based on what we think the other person is thinking or what we think they intend. This often happens when you get a text and there isn't any information about whether the person is laughing or angry when they send it, and so you're just really not sure what to do. So in the absence of all of the information you need, you may estimate what the other person's goals are. And the important thing to understand here is that inferences that we can make about other people can be well informed if we know the person well, but often our estimates can be way, way off base. One of the patterns in disputes that the textbook points out is that the more convinced we are that we know what the other person wants, the less likely it is that our estimate is actually going to be accurate. As a conflict unfolds, our topic, relational identity, and process goals emerge. Topic goals are those objective, verifiable issues that people want to talk about. Relationship goals pertain to the parties' influence on one another, and identity goals have to do with the needs that the individuals have to present themselves positively in interactions.